ready to get ready? Take a seat.
Hi, Robin.
Okay. Well, welcome to our first annual end-of-year conference. Obviously, this is a good idea because we're all here together and wanting to know what we refresher from what we learned at the beginning of the year back in August. So let's do it. We'll learn together and figure out how we can make it better for next year. Sound good? So I'm going to try to operate two devices here. Let's see how this works. So welcome and thank you for being here. I know it's hard to step away from your everyday work and come here in off-site. So I just want to say thank you very much. I also want to say thank you to the staff and my team in strategic sourcing and contracts. I'm going to do some quick introductions. But first, my name is Andrea O'Hara. I'm the strategic sourcing and contracts officer. I oversee contracting and procurement. Our offices are on Cardinal Lane. So the team that I have here from my department, I have John Grohl, Contracts Administration Supervisor. Najwa Faraci, Contracts Administration Supervisor. Debbie Giazzetti, Administrative Assistant to the glue to our department. Robin Hoffpower. Out in the hallway, I have Barbie Cluis. She's a new buyer to the district. She comes from the Scripps Institute of Technology, 32 years in purchasing and accounts payable. She's a great asset to the department. Go easy on her. She's been here for about 6 weeks. And we also have a TOC purchasing services clerk here with us helping, Cecilia Fuentes. She's also out in the lobby helping us. We also have Joe Tedesco. He took over for Tammy Moffitt. He is our material control analyst. Almost as loud as Robin. That's so great. So thank you to my team. And then as budget finance, we have distribution here. They'll do introductions as well. We also have later, after our break, John Hensley will be here to answer questions about PPO. So it's really exciting to have the team here today. So aloha, doesn't it feel like we're on a Caribbean island somewhere? Not really, but you know, it's prep. It's prep for the quick end of the year that's coming up. And maybe you're going on a vacation, or maybe you're just going to sit on the beach here in sunny San Diego, or maybe you're going to pick up a second job during the summer. But either way, we want to get you there. We want to get you to the end of year as smooth as possible. So hopefully you're going to take away some good information today. Just also wanted to point out that this is going to be taped. We have our videographer in the back. He's taping this, so it'll be available online for the year-round staff that cannot be here. And when you go back to your site next week and you can't remember what I said, guess what? You can review it because it's going to be online.
Good idea.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so some housekeeping. We have some great vendors out in the outside. Those are our Direct Connect vendors. Some changes you may have seen with our points of contact, so it's good that they're here. You can put faces with names and emails. So make sure you visit them if you haven't already. Please make sure you sign in. So we have the sign-in sheets in the lobby. And make sure you pick up what we call our placemat. We tried to design something that was easy for you to keep on your desk, and maybe you're putting snacks on it, or maybe you're hanging on your wall, but we're calling it our placemat. And it's the things that our department believes are the most important to just know and have a quick reference. So it's two-sided, and make sure you pick one of those up on your way out, or there's some up here on the table. Feel free to come up and pick one up now. And my staff knows this. We are not formal. So if you wanted to just come up now and pick anything up that you might have missed, or a question comes up in between one of the presentations, just come on up and put your questions in the box so we can address it. So we're going to learn a lot of information here today, and it's really just a small part of the important work that you do in your department and your school site. What's important is that you're taking this information and you're making those changes and you're applying them to your everyday work. One step, one day at a time, 1 week at a time, year by year. And it's just being consistent. So to just reinforce what consistency is and why it matters, I'm going to show you just a quick little TED Talk. I do a lot of TED Talks in my department, and this one I think is really, really neat. Simon Sinek is going to do a little TED Talk as soon as my friend in the back cues it up for me. There he goes. And we're having a little YouTube issue, so unfortunately it's not full screen, but hopefully you can hear his voice.
Relationships aren't built out of thin air. They take time. It's consistency versus intensity. You can't get in shape by going to the gym for 9 hours. It doesn't work that way. But if you go to the gym every single day for 20 minutes, you will absolutely get into shape. Consistency matters more than intensity. Intensity is going to the dentist twice a year, as prescribed. And if you only did that, all your teeth will fall out. We like intensity because it's easy to measure. I know exactly what time I'm going to the dentist, I know the date, I know how long I'm going to be there, and I know the results. This is how we teach leadership. We have a big seminar, we have an off-site, we have a couple speakers, everybody gets a certificate, we give the speakers high reviews, 8.5, I had a great time, I'm a leader now. No. You don't fall in love with one big beautiful dinner and a bouquet of flowers. It's the little stuff. It's brushing your teeth every day for 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the evening. By itself, it does nothing. Nothing. It's the consistency. It's the repeat that makes our teeth healthy. And that's how relationships are built too. The way we build friendships, the way we build trust, the way we build camaraderie is when we're waiting for Bob because we're a little late, because he's a little late. We talk. Hey, I heard your dad was in the hospital. Is he okay? Oh yeah, thank you. He's much better. He's home now. Thank you for asking. Hey, whatever happened with that client? I heard something exploded. Oh my God, it was insane. By itself, it does nothing. But when we create environments in which those kinds of conversations happen on a daily basis, by removing the technology and allowing people to connect, you will see a rise in trust, a rise in cooperation. You will see a building of confidence. You will see an ability to rely on people. And why is it important to rely on people and trust people? So we can create environments of vulnerability. Vulnerability doesn't mean walking around crying. Vulnerability means creating an environment in which somebody feels safe enough to raise their hand and say, I made a mistake. I don't know what I'm doing. You asked me to do a job I feel ill-equipped to do. I'm scared. I'm nervous. I'm lonely. We haven't done that. And we've unfortunately exaggerated so many of these things. We've made the feelings worse.
So that's one of the consistency messages that I showed to my staff. And why I think that's important is because, as Simon was saying, it's not that you're going to come here and you're going to be experts and you're going to go back and be able to close out all your books and spend all your budget and receive all your POs and just make everything perfect for the end of the year. It's not going to happen. It takes one step at a time. It takes remembering where the resources are that you have available and looking at them every day that you have available. So now I'm gonna do something else that I make my staff do a lot, and that's personal interaction. So can everyone stand up, please? I want you to just look around and say your name and your department and say hello to at least 3 people around you. Don't sit back down, just say hello. And say where you're at, say hello. And s- Okay, we're not making dates here. Most of us are married. We're not trying to. Okay, so now that we're all friends, go ahead and have a seat. Wasn't that fun? Now that we're all friends, this is your peer group. Our department is small, but together we are large and we have a lot of knowledge. There are a lot of employees here that have been here much longer than me, much longer than possibly you. Maybe you've been here the longest in this room. Don't scare her off. So now that you have all these new friends, don't be embarrassed to reach out and ask a question. Be vulnerable. Say you forgot. Say, I can't remember. I'm not sure where it is. No one ever told me. Can you help me? Has this happened at your site before? I don't know what to do. What is that form that she was talking about? I can't find it. Can you help me? You've just met a bunch of new friends. So this is the space that we're going to start asking questions that I may not have the answers to, but hopefully Robin will. So that's what we're going to do here today, is we're going to get you answers that you need to get you to the end of the year. So like I said before, maybe you don't have the courage to ask your supervisor, your budget analyst, your buyer on what to do, how to do things. There are some boxes right here, and they're anonymous questions you can put in there, and we're going to answer them the best we can, okay? We are filled with knowledge and experience. And there's no judgment here. I certainly don't know everything. And we're going to do our very best to get you the answers that you need. And then hopefully next year we'll be able to incorporate those questions and answers onto a one sheet. We won't even need these boxes because we're going to know it all, right? So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the actual work, should we? I'm going to introduce John Grohl. John's going to come up and start the presentation on ePro requisitions. Let the fun begin. You all have your today's agenda. I don't need to go through it. If you don't have one, there's some at the front here, and there's also some in the lobby. Do you want questions too? Or do you want to walk? I'm a walker and a talker. You don't like
Test. It is.
this one's on and that one.
All right. I'm going to stay away from this so I don't get any feedback. Now for the exciting stuff. Is everybody ready? Wow, that's pretty far away. Hopefully you can see better on these screens, but if this is your first time, that'd be the only reason that you wouldn't be familiar with this, because we're kind of back to the beginning again, back to school. But it's very important because this is where it all starts, at the ePro requisition level. The more information and the more detail and accuracy, the more likely the requisition is going to process efficiently, and the material or services that you're interested in will show up or be provided as you need them. So just bear with me. This is a typical ePro requisition. Of course, we start with the item description, always being with the noun. In this description is kind of the meat and potatoes, or the heart of the requisition. You want to have a noun, an example: chair, book, lamp. The make, which would be like IBM, Acme, Safeco, whatever the company is that made it. and the model number. And that's kind of the real key right there, the model number or the SKU. That's what the vendors look at when the PO comes into them and they want to know, well, what am I supposed to provide? One side note, if it's an asset over 500, all of these letters in here should be capital. So an example would be printer, all capital, HP, which would be the make, and then whatever the printer happens to be, P401 LaserJet. And like I said, if it's over 500, those should all be capital. Then some of the more obvious things, the price. One thing about prices, you don't have to worry about the tax, because when the requisition gets turned into a PO, the tax gets automatically applied. And then if there's any shipping or freight, that would be separate. Quantity, of course, how many do you want? The category, which is associated with the budget string, the item category. An example would be GDS underscore 4301 for general supplies. Unit of measure, of course, would be typically each or a set. Not so much gallons, but those kind of those kind of unit of measure. The due date, now this depends, goods or services. For stock would be the current date, but for pretty much everything that you're ordering that a vendor would deliver or supply would be roughly 2 weeks. The PO's got to get to the vendor has to receive the PO, understand what needs to be ordered, place the order internally. If they don't have it, send it to a third party, and then get it shipped to the district. So you figure about 2 weeks. For services, type in the date the service is to be completed by. And then, of course, one of the most important things is the vendor. Who is the vendor? We have over 30,000 vendors listed in PeopleSoft. So hopefully you can find that particular vendor, but if it's a new vendor, which happens, then you would put in the suggested information and put as much information as you can, their address, obviously their name, anything that is pertinent to making sure that that requisition gets processed timely. Of course, that's kind of the goal. Any additional information, your point of contact, your name, phone, any additional details that may be of importance. For example, if you're ordering something, unfortunately some of the things that we don't get all the time that you may want to add, say it's a piece of furniture. Furniture is notorious because there's a lot of different things. There may be different types of material that they can put on the top of it. There may be different colors. If it's a chair, there may be different types of fabric. So you want to make sure, and that may still be within that same SKU, so even the vendor wouldn't know. So you want to put any details that are necessary. So again, this is kind of the starting point of the process, so we're kind of going back to the beginning, but it's important because we make sure that everything happens quickly and efficiently. Then lastly, attaching backup files, primarily quotes, but anything else that may apply, like a registration form, if that's the case, or anything, again, that helps us understand and the vendor understand what it is that you need. Think of it as the person that's receiving this information has no idea what you want. And put in those things, those key items, and that will go a long way to getting a very efficient and quick response. If you need to see this again, it'll be in the presentation here, but it's also on the Strategic Sourcing and Contracts website. So there's a lot of great information on there, so you can find that. The Back to School from last August is on that site, and it's got this slide on it. So you'll be able to find all kinds of great details. I think we were going to go ahead to the next slide. This is yours. Did you walk?
I do walk a lot. Okay, so continuing on with ePro requisitions. So now you have all the information to make a perfect requisition. How long should it take? That's what everyone wants to know. How long should it take? Expectations that we've set is 7 business days. I'm going to read through what takes it 7 business days. And then I'm going to read to you why it takes longer. Okay, so the ePro is sourced from the employee's managed requisitions. 3 days. We give 3 days. So your perfect requisition now hits our employees' managed rec. We're allowing them 3 days to look through that requisition. That process, after they approve that, goes into a holding tank we call expedite. It sits there, an expedite requisition. We give our employees 1 business day. Then from there, if it's all perfect, it goes into a PO. And then we give our employees 3 business days. Does that add up to 7? It does, 7. Now let me read you why it takes longer. The requisition requires an agreement or an ICA, which now requires Board of Education approval, 8 to 12 weeks. The requisition has no quote attached. Somebody has submitted a requisition that says book. We don't know who to buy the book from. We don't know what kind of book you're looking for. We don't know how many books sometimes, if it's a lot or if it's one or if it's a case. 3 business days. The supplier is not set up in PeopleSoft. So now we have to look for W-9s if, unfortunately, you haven't provided one to us. We have to enter the vendor into PeopleSoft. We need the vendor approved in PeopleSoft. Another 2 days, 2 business days. Now it goes from rec to expedite to PO. We're ready. It's in budget error. So now we're waiting for a budget to be approved. 3 business days. And it happened between March 15th and May 15th. End of year, add 5 business days. That's why we can't get it done in 7 business days. So if you see on the front end, if all of those things can be taken care of, then maybe we can hit that 7 business day expectation. And that's one of the things that we're doing now is tracking what our expectations are, and if we're meeting those expectations to our customers, to you. You are our customers. But if we don't know what your expectation is of us, we don't know whether or not we're meeting it. So we're saying 7 business days. But if it's not, did it fall into any of these factors? Can we fix them easier? What kind of processes can we put in place? What kind of communication can we have amongst each other to make things go faster? So on our website, we have the flow chart there. It's also on your placemat, and it should help you guide you and your staff to get a requisition from rec to PO in 7 business days, and that essentially helps us too. Robin, anything before we take Q&A from the sites? Okay. Do we have any questions in the box? Let's see. We'll take questions from the audience. Look at our brave risk takers. Not even, okay, which one's this? No, that's contracting. Are there purchasing templates, and are they active? Maybe, John. I know that we have been doing a cleanup with our templates. Buyers that we've had in our department for a while have since retired, and so the templates that they kept up are no longer active. Item numbers change, things like that, specifically for computers. John, anything specific about purchasing templates?
I just want to make sure that I'm addressing the right question, or the right answer, I guess, for this question. Templates in general are a list of item numbers that when you go in to create a requisition, you pick that template or that kit, purchasing kit. Say it's called computer and computer 1. And if you pick that, it generates a requisition for you, or creates a requisition with all those item numbers on it. The computer, the services required, recycling fee, whatever, automatically comes across, and it's based on those item numbers. Currently, I'm I can't think of any that we have currently active, but one thing that we were working on in the past month or so was to get the computer item numbers updated. Computers are good and bad. They're good because it helps us get a very clean requisition if the template is already created. The challenge with it is computers change like every 3 to 6 months. So if we don't keep the item numbers updated, it creates a bad requisition. So that's one of the things we're working on right now. Robin's looking at me, so I think I better give her the...
There is a little difference between templates and item numbers. We do have some items on item numbers, such as two-way radios, the two-way batteries, and lamination film. Any of you that need to buy that, if you go, like when you're ordering paper, you go to Express Item Entry, type in lamination film, and it'll come up with all the different sizes that we have in the item catalog, or type in radio, and you'll see the two-way radio, so it'll pop up the description for you right away. So all you have to do is put in your quantity or the batteries, type in battery, and that'll pop up for you as well.
Thank you, Robin. Patty.
When you put in a reg, and then you see in the status it says PO created, and it hasn't been dispatched.
Thank you for asking. No, the answer is no. So that would fall in that 7 business day cycle. So if it's been created, it means it's waiting there. We're just waiting to dispatch it. But no, do not dispatch it because something could change.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you. That's a good question. Anyone else? Yes, thank you. And you know, W-9s should be updated annually. They're not. It's so much work because they could acquire another company. They could be a DBA now. They may have, you know, especially if they were at one time a vendor using a social security number and now they're actually a corporation and they have a federal tax ID number. The address could change. There's so many nuances of why W-9s are important. Anything about W-9s and vendors? Okay. In your requisition? Her question is that she was told a while ago not to put due dates on her requisition.
Personally, you don't need to put a due date. The system will sign it for you. Yeah. Now, do you need to? No.
But I think it's important to put somewhere on your request when you need the items by. I mean, especially if you're using grant funds, we want to make sure that the items are due to you at a certain time. So in your
If you I would say if you have like a personal development, a teacher development day or something. After the principal's been approved, after the principal approved. Oh, sorry. So if there's an urgency and a full-blown urgency, not just because your teacher wants it, email us that, hey, I need this rec, because we're getting just tons of orders right now. We can bump that to the top and take care of it. Because we won't see it in the comments section when we're doing it. You know, like college trips are coming up. Obviously, that has to go right away. So it would be good to email us, you know, right away, say, hey, you know, we need to get this processed ASAP. Just putting it in the due date, we're not going to see it. You know, but make sure it's after the principals approved it, because we can't get our hands on it until then.
Thank you. Najwa is going to go through best practices for purchasing, and then we'll do more Q&A.
Relative to this, you mentioned been buying, you know, selling to the rest.
Yeah, yes, when you when you enter your requisition, there's a little icon next to vendor ID. You click on there and search for it. If you don't find it, go to the short name, and Gopher is a good example. We see a lot of recs coming through where you guys unfortunately can't find Gopher because you're looking for it under the regular name, well, their legal name is the profit corporation, so you don't find them, when in fact they're DBA Gopher. So if you find them in the short name, so when you're looking for in the regular name Gopher and you don't find it, then you're going to suggested vendor, and they're a 12-line requisition, so every single line you're typing that out. When you don't find it, go to the short name and type in Gopher, because what we all know the vendor by, we're putting that information in the short name, and then hit search. And you should find it then. And then if you don't find it, then unfortunately you'll have to enter him as the suggested vendor. Now, what I do recommend to people, if you have lengthy requisitions, we don't want you to have to enter 20 different lines as a suggested vendor. So get the W-9 for me, give it to me, I'll enter it, give you the vendor number so that you could enter it just one time. And also, don't forget, when you've got lengthy requisitions, to use that wheel on the top corner, which pops in all this information for you, so you don't constantly have to look for the vendor unit of measure. It all pops in for you.
Okay, thank you, Robin. We're going to do some best practices, and then so hold your question, and then we're going to do more Q&A after this. I actually went to Q&A before I did this slide, so that was my fault.
Hello, everyone. Well, best practices, okay, good, it's on there. Best practices really is going to summarize a lot that was already been spoken about. We've mentioned several times that you want to make sure that the supplier is in PeopleSoft. This helps expedite the requisition approval and sourcing it into a purchase order for dispatch. If you're able to request a W-9 for a vendor that you cannot find and attach it to the rec, or go ahead and scan it and email it in to the buyer that you're used to working with for your commodity, and we can go ahead and do what we need to do on our side to make that vendor entered into PeopleSoft. So a couple options there, but anything that you guys can provide us to help us expedite the requisition for you is extremely beneficial. So one thing that we've also really started to encourage is the use of the P cards. How many of you guys are the P card holder for your site? Yes, this will work well for the Amazon portion of this. But that's good to know. I hope it's been a useful process for your site and you guys receiving your goods pretty quickly. Prior to putting into that, creating that requisition, it's also good just to check to see if you can use your P card for that and save a lot of headaches, I think, and time, so you guys can get your stuff. One thing that was introduced and really enforced with our department this year is EDGAR, which is the Education Department General Administrative Regulations that requires 2 quotes for purchases and services over, or purchase of goods over $10,000. We need you guys to provide your quotes in the requisition, again, to expedite the whole process. And those quotes are helpful because, as John mentioned and Andrea mentioned, without that description of what you guys want, we're not sure what to compare it to. We're not mind readers, we can't see through the computer. So when you have your quotes, you guys as the end user or the subject matter expert know the specs of what you're looking for. So your quotes should be pretty equal to each other by description. Let's see. When you submit your requisition, you want to follow through to make sure it has been dispatched. You've heard about the delay and the reasons that there may be a delay in dispatching that PO. The most calls that I get is to dispatch the PO for them, but when I go do it, it's in budget error. So it's important to follow through. If you feel like it's been an excessive amount of time since you've submitted that requisition and you're tracking it through approval, give us a call and say, I've noticed it's still pending, and it shows it's in budget error. There's many resources. We can reach out to the budget analyst. You guys can reach out to your budget analyst, the buyer, as well as Robin, and we'll help process these. So follow through. And you want to request an invoice from your supplier. And the invoices should have the PO number on it. It should be signed and submitted to AP invoices at sandy.net. Distribution services, they have a very unique email, supctrec@sandy.net, but that's for distribution services. You want to email distribution services to receive your goods or the services. They have to key it off. Another step, yeah. Yes. Thank you, John. It's for items not being delivered to the warehouse. Did you have something? Oh, just laughing at me? The PO, if your PO has additional funds, meaning unencumbered funds, once it's been dispatched, whether it's a term PO or you submitted or there's a purchase order for the goods you're to receive, we need to close out that PO and return the funds to you. So please also be tracking that. Your hands are not clean once you get your goods. Just make sure we got it at the price you wanted it, or our buyers may have negotiated a lower price and you have more money left against that PO. So we want to do close out and return the funds to you guys. Did you want to add to closing POs? No, not now. Okay, we're good. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Robin.
One thing I want to let you guys know, when you do returns on, let's say, Staples, Office Solutions, the credit will get posted against your purchase order, but you don't see that money back in your budget until I close it. So email me about 3 weeks after you do the return so that I can check in the system and see if that credit's been posted so that I can close it out so that money goes back to your budget. I see lots of orders that people have lost their funds because credits were posted, but the POs never got closed out. Another thing too, software licenses and ICAs. You really, really want to make sure that those get received or that payment link gets lit up on your managed requisitions. You can see that. Click on the arrow pointing towards your requisitions. I saw thousands of dollars get lost from last year. It was encumbered last year, but it got expensed this year. Just because you sent the invoice to accounts payable doesn't mean it got paid. So you want to make sure before you leave in June that that payment link is lit up to ensure using this year's funds. You can type in there, must be used by this year's funds, but it's not going to happen if that payment link's not lit up. That's it.
So some points that you're not going to find on the slide, kind of a last-minute add, but I think they're very beneficial points. I want to talk about the best practice when receiving your products and communicating with distribution. So I mentioned the distribution services email address. You want to know that one. Again, it's important to always reference the purchase order number in the header of your email so that they can quickly grab what they're looking for. You want to make sure to state in the body of the email the specifics of a statement, that specifies order received. So you'll have the purchase order number, dash, order received, or order never received, but they should have that. Any copies of the invoices, again, as you send them to AP, they should be signed and dated. And one thing for the asset, if an item, John mentioned, an asset is an item over $500, we need to C-tag that item, and there is a process. So distribution needs to key off the receipt of that asset. Sorry, there's a gnat. And when they key it off and you identify that this is an asset, when they key it off, they're able to send the C-tag to the school site to be placed on that item. So if you receive an item that is an asset at your school site, distribution services needs to be notified, and they'll send the C-tag to the school. I think we'll talk a little bit more about this later. Or you want to add to it?
Yeah, if I can just add one
Cool.
other thing.
Here you go.
I'm Jeff Bellman. I'm the supervisor at the Supply Center. And so when you send those to the email account, just make sure that you give that serial number, because we cannot put in the receipt without that serial number for that product. So we'll have the serial number, we'll issue a C-tag, we'll send that C-tag out to the requester through the regular school mail to be able to do that.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, that's pretty critical in the email to include the serial number so they know what to put on the C-tag. So, perfect. Well, that's all I have. I don't have the remote. Q&A. Any questions for best practices or from what we just previously discussed? Wow, lots of hands. I'm going to start in the back and work my way forward. Over there, let me go up there and bring this. The prices are right. Right.
Now remember, because we're recording this, we're trying to capture all the questions too.
Regarding the credit, posting of the credit, Robin mentioned that we have to check after 3 weeks. Why can't the payable that after they post the credit, can they just email Robin directly?
The question is, instead of checking to see if the credit was posted, why can't accounts payable just check and email
that to
Robin?
So at least Robin can just immediately post the credit instead of us checking it from the site.
We can table that question and possibly address it during the accounts payable section. Would that be okay?
Great, thank you. Wait. Anyone here? Here?
So at Welcome Back, we were told that we should not send emails to Distribution Center for direct connect things like staples. So now all of my staple requisitions for the entire year just show distribution, it just show that PO dispatched and nothing's been received. So how would I get a credit back from Staples for a returned item if nothing's been received at all?
Let me give you my opinion. Let me give you my opinion on the Direct Connect orders. But my opinion is your managed requisitions is your checkbook, and you're balancing out that checkbook before you leave for the summer. So that's why I think it's important that you make sure your payment link on everything is lit up, making sure your checks are cleared. On the Direct Connects, and I'm going to use, I don't know if Morris High School is here today or not, but I'm going to use Morris High School as an example. Luckily, Sonia last year called me and said, Robin, look and see if everything looks clear. And I looked, and it was she had ordered a bunch of stamps in March, and she called me in June, almost ready to leave. And I said, Sonia, did you get your stamps? And she goes, oh yeah, I got my stamps. Well, there was no invoice, $3,000 worth of stamps, and no invoice posted. If I had not brought that to her attention, she would have got to pay that $3,000 in this year's money, because Staples, I'm sorry? She would have paid. Well, you should have got the funds based on receipt accrual. So that is a budget issue. So you should deal with budget on that one. Because you should have, Sonia. Are you Sonia? No, I'm not. Okay, so you should have gotten the money based on receipt accrual, because we made sure that that requisition was received before June. But back to your question, make sure even your Direct Connects, even though you don't email Jeff and let them know you got everything, make sure everything's paid. If not, get those lines received, because you are supposed to get the funds based on receipt accruals. Yeah.
Coming.
No, I just want to add, I don't need that thing.
Well, other people that side can't hear.
I just want to add, you have to make sure you do your receipt accruals, because if you don't do your receipt accruals, AP's not going to know, and the invoice is going to be paid from next year's funds. So whoever in Morse, I hope you did do a receipt accrual.
I just got it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, more questions? Yes.
For this new requirement of Edgar, where 2 quotes for purchases over $10,000, it's for the entire quote as being over $10,000, correct? And what can we do to, there's going to be certain situations in which 2 quotes won't be appropriate because it's a unique item that's only sold by one vendor?
So that's a situation which we have a sole source provider, and typically we get a letter from them. You can request it, you can work with the buyer, and you can write that this is a sole source provider. We'll reach out to the vendor to understand why. They usually just send us a letter on their letterhead stating that they're the only ones that can provide this item. Lego is a good one. Lego is the only company that sells their Legos. So they're a sole source provider. They send us a letter for every purchase that we do.
And to clarify, it's
Yes.
the Lego kits. So specifically for Lego, what Naja was talking about is Lego had bundled these particular kits that they were making. No other distributor would sell us the kits that Lego provided. So we had a letter from Lego on their letterhead, and we just had it as backup. In the circumstance of, some some equipment, like would be a special ed equipment or something, similar to that. An email from even you would be acceptable, saying that you've done your research and you cannot find any like item, just the email communication there. And then we can have our buyer follow up and get the sole source letter from the company. We don't need you to go and do all of that work there.
I'm thinking more like definitely specific things like we're not going to source an item.
That's right. Yeah.
Good question.
How do we keep tracks of, I do a lot of term POs for special requests for the payment. You said that to keep track, make sure that lights up at the end of the fiscal year. And I key off a lot of invoices for that same PO. How is it easier for me to make sure that everything's been paid?
Arrow pointing toward your requisition. And that should give you the payments.
Does it include the invoice number there?
Have our new friend, this is Patty at Printing Services.
Oh.
Yes, let's take that. And Patty, she has a lot of terms, so she can tell you what she does.
So Patty's going to talk about what her process is, because she does a lot of term POs.
Yeah, so when I'm trying to see what's been paid and what hasn't, I keep an Excel spreadsheet of everything, every requisition and every invoice. And what I do is when I go into my budget overview, and I'll look up that budget and I look at what's expensed, and I make sure and I go back to my Excel and I say, okay, this one's already been paid, so I know what hasn't been paid and what has been paid. And if I see something that's been outstanding for too long, I'll contact AP and I'll go back to my recs and make sure I've sent it to distribution and AP and say, okay, this hasn't been paid, do you still have it, why isn't it paid?
Is that helpful?
Does it have to include the invoice number in there? It does.
It includes the invoice number also.
Everyone hear that? There's some queries that you can do in PeopleSoft by PO to see all expenses against that PO. You can always call our office. We'll do our best to help you solve your problem.
The buyer does have access to the particular invoices posted against POs also.
Yes. Our buyers have access.
Yeah.
Yes. Anything else?
We have about 5 more minutes for Q&A.
Did you have a question?
Oh, no.
You mentioned earlier about a budget not being valid after the rec, and we have to keep an eye on that. But if you do a budget check before you press submit, when would the budget not work? I mean, if you pass the budget check in the beginning, what are we talking about?
So sometimes in the beginning, the budget analyst may just be doing an override instead of transferring funds. So when it gets to the PO level, there still isn't valid funds, or expenses has hit that budget string after you've submitted that requisition. So now it's in that. So like in the time from the time that you've submitted that requisition, the POs against that budget string has been dispatched. So there's no funding.
Another example would be once it hit the PO, it calculated tax, and that threw you over, or you put that $500 printer as $43.01 when it should have been $44.91, and we had to change it, and you didn't have that account open for that resource.
One more question over here.
These are all good questions.
What I found when I couldn't find or I forgot to click the vendor button, it won't let me go. It won't let me add stuff without a vendor in that box. So I'm not sure why they worry about, please put a vendor in there, because you can't move with it.
That is true. It won't let her.
So, you're forced to do it, which I think is a good thing, because sometimes you're just moving too fast. And then for someone that wanted to look at, have you got your credit yet? Check your detailed transaction report. When a credit's posted, it'll be detailed in that, or I don't use the budget overview. I'm fond of the detailed transaction report because it gives you all the detail across the board.
Does everyone know where the detailed transaction report is accessible from? I know, but I'm sorry. There are some people that are fairly new to PeopleSoft. So if you have those questions on like the user guide for PeopleSoft, reach out to somebody in our office. We'll do our very best. You know, it's not always just, Robin, I need to run a query. Our buyers, our CSs, we're all here to support you guys as well. We live off queries in our office.
There.
The important thing is, though, I need to know when that credit hits to close out the PO. Pamela's really good about emailing me as soon as that credit hits her POs. Hey, I need that closed out so I can see my money.
One more.
When you have a new vendor, is there one particular person or a set of people that would be able to enter the vendor information with that W-9 in?
I'm the only one that can enter.
I know I've gone through Julio before.
Yes, Julio is your buyer, so buyers can accept the information from you, but we're trying to really streamline the process so we don't have multiple hands inside of PeopleSoft adding vendors, so they're set up correctly every single time. So maybe the request goes to Julio. If he is modifying or has the access to enter vendor information, Robin's doing the final approval. Sometimes accounts payable does it too. So if you have the vendor information, you can email your buyer, email Robin. Yes, or both, and they'll both get back to you and CC everybody. Yeah.
It'll get done, and whether for the purchaser of goods or if a contract's going to be necessary, we need that W-9 to confirm the name, the business name that's legally binding to that company so we can use it on the contract. So if you have to give it to your contract specialist or the buyer, it'll get routed through the proper channels in our department to get that vendor entered.
Okay, we'll take one more question, and then feel free to just come up and drop your questions in the box so we can stay on task today.
I think it's an easy one, but where can I find the W-9? Because I'm fairly new and I've never heard what a W-9 is.
We have
I forgot you had a mic.
Yeah, we have them online. We have them on strategic sourcing and contracts on our website. There's a W-9 form there. But if you're working with a supplier and you say you need a W-9, they should know what that is. Yeah. It shouldn't be a surprise to any contractor, supplier. If you ask for a W-9, if they're a business entity, they'll know what you're talking about. And if they don't, then you might want to look somewhere else to buy your things. Okay, so thank you so much for all of these questions. They are really great questions. And again, feel free to drop, if you have more, drop them up in the box. But next up, we have budget. I'd like to introduce Bernice Gill. Is this right? Is this right? Okay. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so here we go.
Oh, okay, thanks. All right, let's see. Well, you know what? I'll talk to that. Okay. Why not? What the hell?
Hello. Okay, here we go. So, hi, my name is Bernice Gill. Just want to quickly introduce myself. I am currently TOCing as a lead financial planning and development analyst. Just a little background, I pretty much oversee all the Prop S and Z construction funds, overseeing all the state school facility funds, for which are grants matching for our construction projects. I oversee maintenance and operations, a lot of various resources and grants, and majority of like central office departments. Today, I want to introduce that I'm not going to be the only one up here talking about budget. It's going to be Deborah Glanz. She's our financial planning development analyst. Highly experienced budget analyst here. Also, we have Jeff Clemens, who's TOC'ing as a financial planning development analyst. So he's also going to be coming up here. So first, we want to thank you for coming to the first annual end-of-year conference. We appreciate you attending this event. We understand how busy our schedules are, especially as we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year. Today, we'll be discussing some very important deadlines. Coming up in the next 3 months, we do want to ask if you can please make sure that you plan accordingly. And not wait until the last minute for the last deadlines. A lot of things can come up, and any missed opportunities will lead to expenses hitting in next year's budget, and we surely don't want to do that, especially if you have grants or resources that are expiring on or before June 30th. And if you don't have those encumbrances in place, make sure that the invoices are going to be paid and expensed in this year. If not, those grants basically are based on reimbursement. And therefore, if you don't make the deadlines, it will hit next year's budget and it's going to be some other type of funding. We'll lose that opportunity. So first, I really don't know why it came out that way. That's not how I submitted my slide. So let's first start off. First important deadline coming up is April 25th. It's basically, another 1 or 2 weeks coming up. The deadline and last day to submit and approve ePro special request and catalog requisitions. That's the final due date. We'll know that anything submitted after that date will default to July 1st, sit in the queue. And the same thing for submitting Prop S and Z site discretionary orders via the Unifier portal. This portal is pretty much familiar to all principals unless they're new. It is a way to submit requests to use those funds. Those funds are very restricted, and there's only certain eligible expenditures that can be used against it. So what they do is, if you want to order some computers, you submit your electronic request to that portal. And you can come to me after the conference if you need some details on who to contact to set that thing up. Besides, what they do primarily is just review the request to see if, and also to see if it's eligible. They will also make sure that you have sufficient balance, because obviously they do carry over and roll over. And if you submit it by that date, they'll submit the recs for you. They handle all the requisitions and purchase orders. If it's something bigger, like a bigger contract, I need a lunch shelter, I need a new marquee, they'll make sure they assign a project manager to oversee that. So the only thing that the sites have to do is just submit the request. That's it. The financial facilities planning and construction department handles everything else for you. If you want to see history on cancellations, what was used in the past, that portal is also a way to see that information. Moving on to the next deadline, for which is May 31st. That's the last day for school site council to approve all Title I budget adjustments. You want to work with the resource teachers who deal with that as well. This is the last day to notify your financial planning and development analyst to process any year expense transfers. And let's see, what else did I noted? Sorry about that. And also to electronically submit a field trip transportation request via Trip Tracker. Just to note, at this time, It's a really good time to pull budget overviews, really look at your site-controlled resources to see if there's any negative balances, and contact your analyst to make sure that everything's kind of cleared and there's no negative balances. If there is something coming up, you need to contact them. If there's a risk to GFU, we definitely need to be aware of it. So please work with your analysts. We're here to support and help you during this process. Also want to note that if you submit an electronic field trip transportation request, if it gets scheduled for up to June 30th, obviously it will happen. Also, let's move on to June the 3rd. That's the deadline, the last day to enter time cards for prime time tutoring. Just to let you know that if time cards are entered after that date, those expenses will need to be covered by some other type of funding. So that's the last deadline, June 3rd, so that's very important. How do I press it to the next slide? Here we go. For June 7th, deadline and last day to submit and approve all ePro Direct Connect requisitions. That means ordering stock inventory items, including copy paper, and ordering printing services from the district print shop. So anything after that deadline, obviously it will hit next year's budget. So please plan accordingly. Moving on to June 14th, deadline and last day to deliver invoices to accounts payable. That's extremely important. Got to make sure that we have these PO receipts on your POs. Make sure that those invoices get to account payable. If not, you're going to have to submit accrual forms. I know recently that the year-end accrual information has been posted on the district website. So please make sure that you read thoroughly, because it's really important to submit those accruals. So if you have received goods or services, but you did not get an invoice, you need to submit an accrual. Because if not, what it'll do is it will hit next year's budget. Also, it's the last day to submit TAs. As you know, that it's required to submit it at least 3 weeks in advance to submit your information, have a department head approve, and also branch head approval. So if you have some professional development events that need to be encumbered and prepaid, that's the last day to do it. As you know that there's a cutoff after expense reports and TAs because the system gets deactivated, and you won't be able to do that until I think July 12-ish. I think that's the date. I'm not sure, but I'm for sure it's on the reference. All P-card transactions need to be posted to the payment net system. And it's really important to submit athletic reimbursement claim forms to accounts payable. Preferably, it could be nice to submit them on a monthly basis, but please make sure that you do so. All of this information is available and in more detail on the district website, and please refer to the revised administrative circular number 46. Let's see, I'm going to hand this off now to Deborah Glantz.
Jeff and I are just going to kind of go over in a little bit more detailed some of the items that Bernice was just going over. We want to kind of explain some of the deadlines to you. So with the athletics, it's a good idea if you can get those units paid by the time athletics is ended. Now, some of you might be going to CIF, and so maybe those coaches aren't going to get paid till June. But if you can get most of your athletic units and even your extended day units for like your drama, this is high schools, so your drama or your ASB and stuff, if you can get them paid by the May 31st deadline or date, so they hit the June, then you kind of can see where your budgets are before the end of the year. Otherwise, they're not hitting until July, and you guys are gone at the beach, and we're trying to reconcile your accounts. So we're hoping that most of the units, now there are times when they're really not finished and they're still working with the students, and you might not be able to pay those extended day units, but it would be really great if you timekeepers, and some of those are the finance clerks doing those extended day units for athletics. If you have questions about those reconciliations or those reimbursement claim forms, Rita is here somewhere. I can't even find her. She's in this. Anyway, Rita Clegg is the go-to person for questions, and she's going to be down here after this, so you can ask. Some of you are new financial clerks or new secretaries or admins and haven't ever done those forms. The other thing about those reimbursement claim forms is you can do them as soon as the sports are over. So the spring ones could be done now. So you're not turning into AP a million forms in June. Poor guys, they processing all those. So it's great if you can do a monthly, you can do them at the end of each season. So, and there's 3 seasons. So get those in as much as you can. And I'm just going to say that, too, with your payroll processing. Just make sure you try to be on top of that, especially at this time of year, so that we can really be looking at your budgets and your before you're gone, before you're at the beach, and we're still working on that. Your expense transfers for Title I and for LCFF, you need to have, she mentioned that you need to have your final SSC meeting and get those transfers into the analyst. Be looking at your budget overview, looking at see what needs to be transferred, working with your analyst to see what needs to be done. Sometimes there's a lot of times there's visiting teachers that were for PLCs that have defaulted to 5 zeros. Maybe the admin was out for a week and she didn't catch them before they defaulted. Let's get those transfers in. A lot of you have the PLC money that's not getting spent. We want to get those out of your 5 zeros, because you need that to be used for other things like extended day units or just end-of-year activities. So those transfers, if you run your cross-site report, you can see what defaults to 5 zeros, and we can figure out what should have gone to maybe another place. I noticed that some of them might be CCTE teachers. Those, and for you guys, many of you have CCTE grants. Those teachers might have been on a field trip for CCTE. Those things should have gone to a different resource and just didn't get caught by the timekeeper. So we really want you to run that cross-site, look at it, and see what's defaulting to your 5 zeros, because that's a resource you can't afford to have things that could be somewhere else in it. And I think, P-cards. So she mentioned P-cards. And one thing I just wanted to mention about P-cards is there's this deadline, and everyone says, well, I got it ordered by the deadline, but guess what? If that Amazon order is back ordered, it's not going to hit the statement, and it will get charged to next year. So try to make sure when you're ordering to Amazon and they said, it's going to have a 5, it's on back order. If it's on back order, it's highly possible it will not get charged to this year. So you might want to think about whether you want to order it now, or maybe there's a different set of books that you can order that would get delivered by this time. So I'm going to head this over to Jeff.
Okay. So the next one, expense reports. For all conferences taken in 2019, the employee needs to complete an expense report before the deadline, even if there are no expenses. This will close out the TA in 18-19, otherwise the TA rolls into next year. So if you're doing a TA, of course you need to do an expense report, otherwise the TA is just going to sit there encumbering the funds that you have. And in terms of the expense report, you see on the 2 previous slides over that deadline of June 14th. So making sure that you're meeting that deadline and all the deadlines really to make sure that the expenses are hitting the right fiscal year. Next one, where it says all paperwork, that is for the Core Academy program. So it says, all paperwork must be submitted within 2 weeks of each Saturday session. Please ensure timely submission of sessions toward the end of the year to allow time for questions before summer break. So always, each time you have a Saturday session, you need to submit that paperwork to the Extended Learning Office within 2 weeks. But especially at the end of the year, it's really important because if you have sessions late May, early June, you submit them right before you leave and they have questions or need clarification and you're no longer there, obviously they can't. So especially those end of the year ones, make sure you submit them as soon as possible. Last one, encumbrances. Try to get all encumbrances paid by June 30th, 2019. So if you have ICAs or other people on site, usually a lot of them are begging to get paid, but some of them you have to beg and plead to pay them. They don't give that invoice. So if you're coming up in June and $5,000 has been encumbered, you still haven't paid them because they haven't given you an invoice, make sure to get that invoice from them and pay them before you leave. Again, 2 slides previously, it had June 14th as the last day to submit invoices to accounts payable, so make sure to meet that. If you don't, between June 15th and June 28th, you can submit it with the accrual form. Admin circular number 60 just came out, so if you're needing to accrue an invoice that you received June 15th to June 28th, you'll fill out that form and give that to accounts payable. And of course, make sure that it's received in the system, right? So that the invoice itself can actually be paid, what strategic sourcing was talking about earlier. Okay, and I think that's it for me. So any questions? Go ahead.
My question is about P cards. I purchased about $1,000 worth of stamps in January, and I still haven't seen it hit the budget. How long do I wait?
So they've only entered, for those of you that look at your budget transaction report, you guys are looking at, they've only entered through mid-December. And the holdup is because they're having problems with any travel. Oh, okay.
Sorry. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, so I called the P-card people. They've only loaded through mid-December because they are having problems with any sites that have used the P-card for travel. So if you look at your budget detailed transaction, you'll only see your charges for your P-cards only through December, so it's still pending. So it still hasn't hit your budget yet. Everything. So only through mid-December they've loaded.
Too old for running.
Let me clarify that. The only journal that has not been posted for P-card is from February 16th. Anything that you purchased prior February 16th is been posted into as a journal. We're just trying to be proactive because when you're doing purchase by travel, your conference, your hotel, or your airfare, it's not hitting the right account. And then you guys are calling budget analysts and saying your charges are being double charged. So we're trying to fix that and being proactive. But anything, if you purchase stamps in January, it should be there. And if you want, you could come and ask me afterwards and I'll check that for you. But it should be there. because it's only from, I just closed the journal, yesterday's journal, and it was everything from February 15th is on there.
I'll talk to you after. Okay.
So, and the other question that was written in there, it says, what's the best way to calculate available balance for athletic accounts so that the exact amount can be given to the AD on how much they have available to spend? I mean, looking at the budget overview, obviously for that resource, if it's not specific, you can call your analyst or whoever wrote this question. Rita will be available afterwards. She's definitely the expert, and she could probably help you better with that. Okay? Yes?
Okay, I understand that the money in CASAS is not going to be, it doesn't roll over, correct? So we have, how long did they take to credit our accounts? Because you said that we need to submit our reports within the 2 weeks. We submit our reports the same, like on Monday or Tuesday after our Saturday session. But how long did they take to credit our accounts? Because then we're going to have money, and we only have now 2 weeks to submit April's. So I just want to have a realistic amount when I do my budget overview, how far this money is credited already.
Okay, so when is it going to be available? So for CASAS Core Academy, it's Resource 77. What happens is you offer a session. They're submitted to the Extended Learning Office. They give us budget once a month to load into PeopleSoft. So by that time, a lot of times the payroll expenses have already hit, so you're going to see a negative quite often. If you're looking to buy or purchase expenses, PeopleSoft has a negative or not as large of a balance that you think it should. Go ahead and email me. I can look more into detail at how much money you truly have, not just what PeopleSoft shows. And we can kind of go from there to see if we can get the requisition overridden or whatever the case is.
How long does it take for bus transportation to post expense?
So I think I might have the answer for you. To make it short, it really depends. So has the field trip already occurred?
Yes, all of them.
Okay, so if all of them occurred, field trips just like P cards, just like printing, and let's see, what are the other 5700s? You know, PPO charge, you know, job costs, things of that. They get posted once a month. It's usually before the 8th business day of the following month. So we're trying to be very proactive and post them every month. And so you should be seeing those field trip expenses. If not, I would recommend to contact Jim Felix. He is the budget transportation supervisor at Field Trips, and he handles all the billing. So if it's not showing up, and we've been posting, I could tell you that all the transportation and the fleet expenses were posted last night as of dated 3/31. I know because I posted the journal. So if you don't see it in the actuals, and if you don't see, you know, in your budget overview for all those costs, I would recommend to call him, and he's very nice. He would definitely answer your questions, okay? Any other questions? Feel free to also, you know, if you don't want to ask, feel free to, you know, write down any questions and put them in the box, and we'll be very happy to answer your questions. If not, you know, all of our analysts and everyone in our department, we're here to help you and assist you. We know that's very tough, especially as we're getting down to the grind of the end of the fiscal year, and as well as us, you know, we're looking at budget overviews ourselves for all of our sites and such our offices to make sure that everything's aligned. And, but you could also do your part too, and just double checking and make sure, because you're running operations there, right? And so feel free to always contact your analyst. There's always someone there to assist you. If not, you could always contact the lead or, Thomas Liberto if necessary, but we're here to help you. So we do a lot of research and help for you. So, don't feel free to always contact us, okay?
Thank you, Jeffrey, Deborah, Bernice. So we're going to take a quick break right now. Yes, please give them a hand. That was a lot of information. That took a lot of time to put together. One of the hardest working departments in this district for sure. So come back at 2:10, and we have our Executive Director, John Hensley, here from Facility Plan Operations. Then we'll do some Q&A and then contracting best practices, and then you can go to the beach.
Test. one. So, but for all the people in the audience asking questions, we can't hear what's questioned. All we can do is answer. So, yeah. But unless you're a person, answer the question. Because there's a few questions that we didn't get the answer for.
I'm going to briefly touch on it, tell me when page is going to come out. As a matter of fact, it's going to be on the screen.
Okay. So there was actually, I think before you came, they were talking about in place of requisition, should they put a due date? And POs, when it dispatches a PO, yes, but stock, no, because they are not going to want to harass for 3 weeks. So I didn't get a chance to answer that. If you want to throw it in there, no due date. Stock. That's going to be, if they put their distribution due date, they won't get it till a week after that. Okay. And then they're gonna need an express issue. Please,
No, you should be up here. So they don't have to do the whole, taking the doing the Oprah thing.
He's gonna say it, so it's good. That's all I gotta say.
You need to things up here anyway, because everybody's just handing it, it's like, who's this weird guy?
That's why I put my picture in the email.
I'll make him look good too, just standing next to him.
It's the men's hair club here. I'm a lot younger, so I feel worse.
Yeah, I was like this at 15. So.
Sort of like the Williams or
Yeah, I could buy beer for my friends early.
There you go. I had the snack. That was it. I did. I used to
slick, huh?
Yeah.
You have to face that can go off that way to go. It's really hard to whiplash,
Get the beeswax.
This will be quick.
One way or the other. Either you give us what we wanted, or we go to the next thing.
Guess what? We'll come to the table.
Great. Rick Hawkins, we purposely asked for the out of it.
Okay, if we could go ahead and get seated, we're going to start. And I skipped over our beloved accounts payable manager's time. I can't believe I did that. But remember, this is the first annual. It's not going to happen at the second. This is the first annual end of year. So go ahead and take a seat, and we're going to hear from our accounts payable manager, Sherry Schumacher. We're also going to hear from Jeff Bowman and Najwa about Amazon. And then John's going to go ahead into some PPO updates. Thank you, Sherry.
Hello? Can you hear me? Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. Hello? Okay. Hi. So my discussion today is on a very specific subject, and that is P-card charges for travel. And we are having some issues with our travel budgets being hit twice for the same travel, and it's because of the 3 different inputs that come in for P-cards. We do our travel authorization, and that encumbers a budget, and then you reconcile your P-card statement, and then that hits a budget, and then the expense report is supposed to clear out the travel authorization, but the expense report, if the JP Morgan reconciliation is not done a specific way, it hits it a second time. So there's also some misconceptions about travel authorization requirements for employee travel. Once the authorization was passed for you to be able to use P-cards for travel, some of the rules were changed, but they weren't changed. People thought they were changed, and so things have happened. We have misconceptions that travel authorizations for employee travel, that travel authorizations are not required to be submitted anymore if you're using a P-card. That you can have an employee traveling, and if you use the P-card for their airfare and their conference, then it doesn't need to be included on the travel authorization, so you just need to submit a travel authorization for the meals they need to be reimbursed for. But that travel authorization then doesn't reflect the entire trip and the purchase of the trip and documentation for the district to know who went and where they went and what the expense was for that training. So basically, nothing has changed from what you knew prior to July 1st, 2018, allowing P-cards to be charged. And I just wanted to give a couple little examples. The little bullet points on the first page, and I'm speaking from this one, so everybody will have it as a reference. If you don't do travel authorizations or you aren't a P-card holder, please share this with your staff, your coworkers that are responsible for that might not be here today, because we're going to be in a massive push to try to get this information out to everybody we can, and it comes from so many different directions that it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly who is impacted by this. So travel authorizations for employees are required in San Diego and out of San Diego. If your employee is leaving your school site or your department, if they're leaving their work site to go somewhere else for a training that costs money to attend, you need to do a travel authorization. That encumbers the funds. It's approved by the department. For some reason, some people were under the impression that if they're attending a training in San Diego County, they didn't need a travel authorization anymore. If it's an employee and they're not going to be at work that day, that's our documentation of where that employee was and what they were doing and why. And it's also our method of tracking the payment, how we paid for it. P cards for travel authorizations are only authorized for 3 specific charges: airfare, lodging, and conference registration or conference entry fees. So we can't use P cards for rental cars, for anything along that line. It's really just for the airfare, and everything else has to be done with personal funds, personal check, personal credit cards, and then when they do their expense report, a check will be cut to reimburse them for any out-of-pocket. When you use your P card for student field trips, travel authorizations, of course, aren't required for the cost of the students and costs of parent volunteers or chaperones unless they're employees. If they're district employees and they're chaperoning a field trip that's going to be overnight, including lodging or any expenses, your employees have to have a travel authorization. It just needs to say that it's for a field trip, and then the lodging, the hotel fees, whatever the costs are for that employee would be recorded on the travel authorization, and so they can get reimbursed for any expenses out of pocket. Let's see. If you use your P card for like a webinar, say your site or department head wants to buy a webinar and have the whole department sit and look at it there at the office, that doesn't require a travel authorization. That's an expense that they can authorize. You can have that training in site. It doesn't involve any of your employees leaving, going somewhere else, being outside of the work site. So, and so I did put this, a good rule to follow. Ask yourself before you charge something on your P card, if this expense is for an employee, a district employee, to attend an event off-site. If the answer is yes, do a travel authorization, and if the answer is no, charge and make your purchase. And the last thing that I really wanted to touch on, we're having the double charging for P card purchases with travel authorizations. We have a way to fix it, but we need to reach out and get in touch with everybody that has P cards and let them know what this is. And it's on the back side of that flyer. When you submit your travel authorization or your expense report, you're going to use your standard budget string, whatever budget string you're authorized to use for the travel. And on the account portion, it'll automatically populate in your travel authorization to 5207 or 5209. You're going to use that budget string for your travel authorization, and at the very end, after the travel is done, you're going to use that same budget string, 5207 or 5209, for your expense report. The exception is when the P card holder goes in to reconcile their P card statement in the JP Morgan website. So once you log into your statement, your charge card statement, and you go in and you find that travel expense and you write your notes, and then you go in to confirm your budget string, the one section that's the account that will say 5207 or 5209, you want to go in and click, just do the drop-down menu for just that account, for just the account portion, and you'll have an option of 9330. If you click and change that budget string only in the JP Morgan website, not anything to do with our PeopleSoft, in the JP Morgan website, change it to the, click on 9330, the rest of your budget string stays the same, that will charge it to your travel without double hitting your travel budget. And finally, I know we haven't had any travel and expenses trainings for 3 years since the big golden handshake a few years ago, and our beloved trainers went on to greater things. And so Crystal, our friend, she has been working with us diligently to create an updated, new and improved travel and expense training. The first one is going to be held on May 9th, but the registrations will be in ERO. I highly recommend anybody or people you work with, whoever's responsible for travel, to please go into ERO, register to attend one of these trainings. I know the first one's May 9th, and it'll just continue to be scheduled until nobody wants to see them anymore, so, which will probably never happen because we have a lot of new people. But please try to attend those, schedule. Even if you're an old timer and you've been around a long time and you know all the rules, it's always a good refresher after so many years, and a few things have changed, and we just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page and we don't have any budget issues and our employees can travel and get all that training that is so valuable. Okay, thank you.
And actually, I only have 2 tips as far as with the P cards. One of them is that we often get P card orders that are shipped or end up at the supply center. And the reason why that's happening is that the vendor will get the Ed Center's address as the default address. What we need to make sure everyone's doing is that when you're placing a P card order, whether it's online or by phone, just make sure that you're verifying with them that they have your shipping address, your school's name, and your name for that matter as well. So that when you do that, just make sure they're reading that back to you. You know, place the order and say, okay, can you tell me where you're going to ship that? Because when that doesn't happen and it comes here, it becomes a long process, because it comes here, has to be taken by the mail van drivers up to the supply center, and then we have to send it out to you. And that could be a delay of days or even a week or longer. And we don't want that. I mean, we want to make sure that you're getting your product as quickly as possible. And that was the whole point of using the P card. The second point I wanted to make sure that everyone understands is that you cannot have any sort of capital equipment asset ordered by P card. And the reason for that is that it has to be put into the inventory system. And the only way to do that is to be able to have that put through requisition form, and it's turned into a PO. And then it comes to us, we C-tag it, we put on, we capture the serial number, or if it gets directly delivered out and you let us know, we send the C-tag out to you. But we cannot have capital equipment ordered via the credit card, because for audit purposes, they have to be able to trace that capital equipment item. And I just wanted to bring up one other point, kind of going back to earlier, that doesn't have to do with P cards, but it has to do with requisitions. If you're making a stock order, when they were talking about the due date, do not put the due date in when you're placing a stock order. Because when you put a due date in, it does not print until the day after. So if you are expecting that order to come next week and you put in that date, it's not going to print out for us until that date. So leave it empty, and that way it'll print out immediately.
Okay, so to watch the time, I'll keep Amazon updates short. Most of the information and updates are located on our Strategic Sourcing and Contracts webpage. There is an Amazon section by itself. We've updated our FNQ document with our new buyer, who I'm going to pass the torch to, but also work with till she gets comfortable, and that's Barbie Cluis. So for the restricted items that you guys come across when shopping on Amazon, you can email me or Barbie Cluis for the override or approval to move forward. And this is key to do prior to completing your order through Amazon and receiving that email confirmation that your order has been received and this is the number. So the restricted items should be requested as an override prior to that confirmation email. And just real quick, why they are restricted items is because we would most likely have a contract already to procure that type of good. We've negotiated rates, or we're just following regulations that prevent us from purchasing items from China. So that's pretty much the Amazon update. Oh, that's it.
That's it. So you're used to emailing me for those restricted items overrides. Go ahead and email Najwa, and until Barbie gets familiar with restricted items and what can be overridden. So next I'm going to introduce John Hensley, but before I do that, did anyone lose their keys? There was a set of keys out in the lobby. They have Regal Crown Club on there, a little purple. Oh, Laurel. Okay. She's the winner. You won keys. Yay. Okay. No. Okay, well, I'll just leave them up here, and then if they're yours and you realize you've left them, you can claim them. Otherwise, it looks like maybe a Toyota or a Hyundai. I don't know. Okay, anyways. John, it is your turn. Thank you so much. Here we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is John Hensley. I work at PPO. I'm going to shift gears on you just a little bit here to start off. We're going to talk about work orders. Most people in this room have either submitted or been upset about a work order at some point in their life, in their career. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about those. So everyone is familiar with the work order process? Yeah? Okay. And how well it works, right? Okay. All right. So you also know what number to call if you have an issue that you need urgent matters with. Everybody know that number? I believe it's up here on the screen. You can barely see it up there. 627-7250. Okay, so if you have an issue, an urgent issue during business hours, and you want to make sure that it gets the right priority, please call the work order desk and submit your work order through our work order clerks. If it's after hours, it is school police if you have an urgent matter after school hours. So you call 619-291-7678. That is the school police number for after hours emergency numbers. Did I get that right? All right, I got both right. All right. So the other thing about work orders I want to get to is that we get about 60,000 work orders a year. And I turned off the mic. Mic back on? All right. We get about 60,000 a year, and we get a lot of duplicates, and they waste a lot of time for us. We go out and respond to duplicate work orders quite often. And then we also have work orders that we're not responsible for. So school sites during a SARC inspection or a Williams inspection, those inspectors will generate work orders for custodial staff as well. So right now we have 1,129 active custodial work orders in TMA that we would like to see addressed. And how we do that is the custodial staff will take their work order and they will go address what it is. It could be a light out, it could be a tripping hazard, an extension cord, something like that. And then they finish it in TMA, and then we close it out on our end. But those work orders, when SARC inspections are active, we get tens of thousands of work orders quickly, and it just adds up to the amount of work order management we have to do. So if you could please look at closing out your custodial work orders as soon as possible. The next one is a new process for work orders. So everybody's familiar with San Diego Fire Department when they're doing inspections. And they come out, some are scheduled, some are not. But our safety office now is going to schedule site visits with the fire department. They're scheduled visits, and they will walk with the fire department. And what we would like to happen is that our safety office meets with the inspector, captures the discrepancies, and then they put in the work orders for you so that you don't have to do anything. We'll get you a copy of the list of the work orders so that you're aware of it, and a copy of the fire marshal's report. The reason is that we're not getting some of those work orders turned in a timely manner to TMA, and then the fire marshal gets kind of upset with us for not fixing the discrepancies that are out at school sites. So that's why we're going to have the safety office in the future schedule those trips or those visits and capture the discrepancies and create our work orders for us. Any questions on work orders right now?
You said in the future.
Soon. like before the end of the school year, you'll see a one-pager come out. Okay? Uh-oh, Phil's got something for us. Nope. We got a new work order number?
That's a number.
278-6740?
Right, 619.
619-278-6740.
Yeah, they changed it.
Well, thank you, sir. Got a new work order number. Yes, ma'am. Correct.
And we frequently have questions between myself and the principal of what
Right.
orders have been put in.
Thanks.
What work order has been put in, and is it possible for us to pull them so that when we have a meeting with the BSS, we're ready to go? And how do we do that?
So the question is, how do you go into TMA? I don't have TMA available right here, right now, but I can certainly work with you on making sure that you have access to TMA and know how to query all your work orders at the school site, okay? If you'll just send me an email, John Hensley, jhensley@sandy.net, I'll make sure that we get you trained on work orders. Anybody can run work orders. Hensley. Anybody can put in a work order. Okay? Yes, ma'am?
So in regards to, if you could see up there where it says pposervices.sandy.net, that's available to everybody, and technically you can see the list of all your submitted work orders. On the website, on the district website for PPO, there's areas where you could select your school, and it will tell you like what building, let's say what classroom, and once you do the drill downs, you could see all the work orders that were submitted for that particular like classroom building or even your whole entire site. So that information is available, but you got to do some drill downs. So, but it is available on the district website. You go to departments, go to PPO, physical plant operations, and you click on the TMA, and on the far left there's a menu where you can pull up either the project number or the work order number, or you could just drill down in your site and then it will pull that up. So that information is available. I used to work at PPO, so I know.
She's done it before. Did you still have a question? She answered the question? Awesome. Yeah.
We're going to be able to see the status of the work orders and if they're coming out, especially when we get closer to the end of the school year.
So yes, there is a status on the available work order. You can also see if there's been any charges against that work order, so that should be matching those expenses on your budget overview for that particular resource. If it's something that, for example, that maintenance is paying for, obviously you won't see the charges. I mean, you'll see the charges there, but obviously it won't be against yours. A lot of times, if you submit something like, let's say, you have a donation and they want to pay for a certain, item that maintenance doesn't cover, and so you'll be able to see those expenses if they were posted. And it's progressing. So, for example, you submit it, all the approvals go through for the project, whether it's allowable or not. So if they're starting to work on it, you'll see the progress of them submitting their hours on the work order. And then, as they continue on. So charges get posted once a month for all TMA activity. And so it'll be up to that month. So right now, I think the latest, we've had some certain technical issues with TMA posting, but we should be seeing one, I think, this month. And for anything that's not covered by maintenance or something that's outside, like donated or something. So.
On that same place for the TMA?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
You're not done yet.
Not a question, just a comment. On that, when you go into the work orders, you can also see who owns it or who's assigned to it. If you need to contact, say, Jerry Joner or, who it's assigned to follow up or ask questions about it.
Thank you very much. Any other questions that Bernice can answer on work orders? So for those of you who haven't been in the, yes, ma'am.
Are there like timelines for things to be replaced?
The question is
Are there timelines, so if we have a ballast out, what's the timeline for that to be? Are there timelines?
Let me tell you about timelines real quickly here. So we have, when we have lights out, obviously, if we have a whole room of lights out, that's going to get a higher priority rating than if we have one light out in the custodial supply room, okay? So it depends on the priority placed on it. If it's over a teacher's desk or in the principal's office and it's the only light, we need to place a higher priority on that. And as part of inputting the work order, you can put a priority on that as well, okay? So, gentlemen, you do this all the time. You place priorities on the...
Yeah, generally, you do have a, if your VSS, I see the smirk, but you want to emphasize, like, this needs to be done now. When you enter a work order, you have a choice of doing high, low, medium priority. But in the body of the work order, it's more important to explain in detail what's going on. If you look at most of the work orders, I'll say light bulb out, room 505. Referring to light bulb, if you put in the notes, light out, I have gone up on a ladder, I've put a new bulb in, I've determined that it's a ballast, and we've got 4 out in this room, that's going to get more priority than just light out. The electricians will service, I mean, I'm very happy with the service that we get from PPO. If you have something that's a priority and you're not getting addressed, you do. That's one thing, you can call the work order desk. If you have the work order number, if you've looked, that helps, but even if you don't, they'll look it up for you and they will prioritize it as you call.
Thank you. This is great. Any other questions on work orders? Yes. Yes, sir.
In the past, when we placed a work order, the work order number would be emailed to us. We could have an electrician, for example, on site fixing a ballast in one room, and you'd be like, oh, well, I just found out there's another ballast. They want a work order for each individual room. We could put a work order in, request in, and sometimes within moments we would get the work order number. No longer do we get our work order numbers emailed to us. We have to go in and look for them. Is there going to be continuing to do that?
Any other comments?
Yeah, all we have, the email that comes back to us is just the request number. And then the work order, sometimes I have to check on the request number to get to the work order number. Not like before, it's automatic.
Okay, so when a work order is requested, that's exactly what it goes in as, a request for work. When it's turned from a request into a work order, an email should be sent to you if you put your email address in there, telling you what the new work order number is. Yes, sir.
After the change of TMA a few months ago,
Oh, that's right. We just updated TMA. All right, so it's not happening? This is good information for me. I appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
Service
All right.
requests?
So a request for service is simply that you're putting in the request for service. You explain in the body of the request exactly what it is you're trying to do, okay? And then if it's lock, it'll go to a locksmith. It'll be automatically routed to that trade for you when it's turned into a work order. Does that answer your question? No?
What is the difference between service request and work order?
A request is not yet a work order. A request is simply a request. There's some work that is not performed by maintenance. So a request comes in, and let's say it's, okay, well, we do work on marquees too, but I'm thinking of I-21 boards, a lamp and an I-21 board. Lamp and an I-21 board, I-21 or the information technology are the people who do that work. So if you put in a request to replace the lamp, we will not turn that into a work order. We will, though, inform IT of the request that came into us. Okay?
Because you have that choice when you go in there to request.
Oh, are we talking about request for service for a project like self-help? Okay. Yeah. Hey, look, I got people helping me all over the place. Here it comes.
If you want to mount a TV in the office, that would be a service request. Right.
Because that's something you want done, not that you need done. So if something is broken, it's a work order. It's already existing. Something you want to add, you do a maintenance service request, and that's probably paid by site funding.
Shows the last time I was in TV. So they're absolutely correct. I'm sorry I misunderstood you. So if you're requesting service on something other than a broken item, correct? Correct. Yes. It'll be a request for service. Yeah. All right, any other questions? Yes.
I'm on the website right now looking at all my work.
Right.
It looks like I have to look for each individual classroom. There's not just one.
I don't have my glasses.
You have to pull up each individual.
Can you see?
Yeah, if you go here, query. I'll pull up everyone.
Those aren't helping.
Thank you.
Oh, looky here. All right. Yes, so she was looking up work orders. And she was trying to figure out how to query all work orders and not do it by individual building. And we queried.
Yeah, when you get to the page, it'll be work orders on top, query a work order, query a request. You can type in your individual work order, it'll go directly to it, but if you don't know that, you query a work order under your school, of course, and it'll have parameters of dates. You can enter dates up to a couple of years, but if you want to just like do the last month, and then it'll give you a list of every work order that's been entered, not only by your BSS, but by PPO, anybody who's, and then you can search through them and find yours. That's one advantage of if you enter a work order, if you put in the very first what it's about, like plumber, electrician, it's easy to look up that way.
All right, you want to report back on what you found?
Impressive.
So when it's completed,
Yep.
it says reject.
So, to the far right.
There's no place else to go.
They go to the bottom.
Right. We'll see if successful here. Give her just a second. Moving on. All right. Yep, we're going to move on. Thank you. Glasses. All right. Again, questions, please just reach out to me and we'll get you the help that you need. Won't be me, obviously, but we'll get you the help you need to navigate TMA and get your work orders sorted out. Yes, sir.
Just a reminder that it's important to keep the BSS in the loop. There's no need for you if the BSS is not responding. Reach out to us. We'll send Ron to you.
All right, so Ruben is just saying, please keep your BSS or POS informed when you're inputting work orders. Again, we want to avoid the duplicates. All right, so please, if you could, keep your BSS POS informed. All right, so next we'll go to, it's up there. That is the correct one, right? All right, next we're going to go to Direct Connect. We'll start with Direct Connect. So each site has a custodial supply budget, and they are, we need to have those custodial supply budgets used up, if you will, by the April 25th deadline, if you will. So what's going on is we're putting out a new contract on the street for custodial supplies, and it will not be valid until July. Is that correct? Okay. So we need everyone to order up their supplies to cover them from April 25th to, say, July 10th or 15th, somewhere in that neighborhood. 1 minute. All right, I'm done. So if you could please order up your custodial supplies, use up your supplies budget. And if you still have items that you need to get, please talk to your CSS. They can help you with the 5,600 budget. Also, in the very near future, we're going to have a bulk supply. So SSC did a great job and did a reverse auction for us for the most ordered items in custodial. And so we're going to save a little bit of money over the next few years by ordering bulk supplies through the warehouse. It's much like copy paper or lock blocks or feminine hygiene products, okay? Same type of process. So that one pager, we're going to meet with our vendor tomorrow, and we're going to finalize some of the concerns that we have with the products, but we should have a one pager out for that too here in the next week, okay? So again, there's going to be bulk supplies that are going to be ordered through, and it's mostly toilet paper and liners, the most ordered, and paper towels. Yes? It's not turned out. We haven't. I'm just informing you in advance that we haven't put it out yet. This page right here, it's not out yet. Okay, so it will be out within the next week. It'll be on our website, but we're going to send it to all the BSSs and POSs and the principals. Okay? It'll be on the PPO website. I don't know. It'll be on yours as well? Okay.
On strategic sourcing and contracts, we have a whole section for inventory items. It has Joe's information on there, but it also has all of the things that we carry in inventory. So forms, the feminine hygiene products. It touches on food service items too, but it's a whole page dedicated to inventory items. And this information will be on there also.
All right. Thank you. And I think I'm going to stop right there. I was going to talk about beat sheets or work schedules, but I think I'll stop right there. So Q&A, questions, any more? Yes.
I have a general question. I'm a manager at a department, and I'm just wondering, when you guys are doing work order projects, how do you select budget numbers? And the reason I'm asking that is because, again, I'm a manager for a department, and every single year, one of my grant numbers gets used for a PPO project, and I have to go in and jump through hoops to get it reversed. This year, it was $25,000.
I'm not sure exactly how your grant money is being used unless a work order or a request for. Go ahead.
It's not for us.
Okay.
The work order is not for us.
Oh, okay.
We've used PPO before for work orders for this grant in the past years. We haven't had any work orders for this year or last year. And last year and this year, the grant resource number got used for some other project, and we had to have it reversed. So I'm just curious about how you guys select.
Can we talk after this? I'm interested in what department you work for. I'd really like to understand exactly what's going on. Okay?
Yes.
I have a question. You have Kleenex up there. I have button head with their custodian. Nope. 5 out of 5 0.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm sorry, that's foam soap, but we do supply tissues. That's soap, Kleenex soap, but we do supply tissues as well. That can be purchased. Yep. Yep. Box tissues. Thank you. Any other questions? Whew. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So we're getting close. We're wrapping it up with contracting best practices. And I do want to say that the savings, the estimated savings that strategic sourcing and contracts estimated by doing that reverse auction for the janitorial and custodial supplies that are bringing in inventory is close to $300,000. So that is what that process is going to save you, save the district. So I'm going to go into some contracting timelines, and when I touch on contracting best practices, this is contracting if your principal, your teachers, your school site, your resource staff, your department head wants to contract for a professional service agreement that will provide you some type of service at your school site. It doesn't have to cost any money. It could be free of charge. So what I'm going to do is go through the timelines and then talk to you about a frequently asked question that I get often is what's the difference between a grant and a contract? Because I've heard before, my school site got a grant and that's the money, and now we're going to spend it on something with somebody, and that would be the use of a contract. So this is for contracting timelines, and we have this posted on our website. Typically it takes between 8 to 12 weeks depending on the service, the scope of the contract that you're going to be contracting for. Also, whether or not it's an amendment to an agreement. So that depends also how long it's going to take. And just realizing that that is a timeline that we have to abide by because we have to have the Board of Education agenda wrapped up and completed about 3 weeks prior to it going live for the board. So along with the actual work that it takes to negotiate terms and conditions within a contract, we're working against Board of Education deadlines too, so that's why it's a little bit longer. So the first step really is typically what we see is your school site staff, your department head is going to come to you and they're going to have a requisition, or sometimes it's an invoice. And if it's a service and it's above $10,000 and it's a licensed somebody, you're going to be using a contract intake form. I'll show you that on the next slides. The contract intake form is going to capture the same type of information that's used on a Board of Education agenda item. We're looking for the who, what, when, where, why. We really want to sell the board and the public on the services that are needed at your school site. So that's really why the intake form is required. It also is a form that we're going to use to track your contract and your request. We get so many requests for contracting that to have an intake form is a good practice for us. We're always signing a contract number to your specific request. So instead of looking for a specific vendor or a specific service provider, we can look for the contract number that's been associated with your intake form. So that's step one. You get your request, possibly an invoice. Step two is you're going to be working with whoever your requester is to fill out an intake form. The directions, there's examples on our website. The directions to fill that out is on our website. And once that's completed with all the required information, it'll be routed to your area superintendent or your department head. And there are specific people in the district that can sign intake forms. A principal is not one of them. A principal can be on there as a point of contact. They can be identified as the contract representative, the person who's going to oversee your contract, but they cannot sign to the intake form. That's going to be your area superintendent or your department head. On the contract intake form on the website, on the third page, are specific signatories. So if you're confused on who can sign an intake form, it's clearly stated on page 3 of the contract intake form. So step 2, also completing the intake form, is to include the scope of work. The scope of work is not an advertisement from the service provider that you want to do work for. Sometimes we'll get requests from an agency and it's a one-page, what they're telling you is a scope of work, but really it's a one-page advertisement of what they're capable of providing. It's not really telling us the who, what, when, where, why, and most importantly, how much. So having the scope of work really identifies who is going to provide your school site, the children at your school, your staff, and your department, who's going to provide them what type of service. Is it professional development? Is it assemblies? Is it curriculum development? Is it a sporting activity during recess? Something, right? So it's that what. And then the when. The when is really important. That's going to drive the term of the contract. That's also a box on the intake form. The term of the contract is also going to be your communication to your budget analyst on when you expect to spend that money. So does it start July 1? Does it start August 1? Not all contracts have to be fiscal year related, so it could start in the middle of the year. So that's that term of the agreement. And then, so that's the when that I talked about what, and then, really the who. Who is going to be on your campus? Is it going to be a company? Is it going to be the company is providing people? And the most important thing that you really need to realize why we're doing the contracts is to eliminate the risk of the people allowed on our school district campuses around our kids. And teaching our teachers or supporting our teachers. That's what our main objective is to do with contracting, is to eliminate the risk. So we're asking for insurance requirements of our contractors. We are asking for W-9s to make sure that they're a legitimate company, and if they're getting paid, if there's money, that we can get them in the system and that they can eventually get paid for their services. Let's see, where's my clicker? Let me show you the intake form. Can you all see it? It's so big. It's really 3 pages. This is just the first 2 pages. The third page is the signatures. So this really follows the format of a Board of Education agenda item. If you read this and then you read board docs, it's really similar. So the more information you can put in here and the way that you write on your intake form, it's easier for us in contracting to craft that agenda item. The more information you have in the background, the better the scope of work, the easier it is for us to negotiate that contract with service providers. This form was updated on March 9th. It was actually the Friday before we went out on spring break. So this has been updated since then, and it's on our website. So, sometimes best practice is you have the form, you find it, and you save it on your desktop. Always go to our website to pull down the latest form, because we're trying our best to eliminate unneeded boxes or cells and just make it really user-friendly. Right now on our website, you'll see a link for an electronic intake form. That way we can electronically route it. I'm not 100% happy about the way the form came out and the way it's routing, so I don't want to go live with it yet. It's there. It's a work in progress. It's something that we know is going to streamline the process, but it's just not perfect yet. So you'll see the link. Don't use it, but just know that we're working on it. It's something that we know needs to be done. Any other questions about intake forms, scopes of work? Oh, absolutely. We'll throw another party, because it is going to be so great. Because right now we get so many intake forms. If somebody's out and it goes into somebody's inbox, it gets lost. I didn't receive it. I didn't open it. We want to eliminate that error. The question was, will I let you know when the electronic intake form is ready? And the answer is yes, we're having a party. Question right here. You have not missed that part yet. Okay, so the question was, what's the difference between an intake form and an ICA form? And we're going to get there in about 1 minute, I think. Am I 1 minute, Debbie? Okay. Let's see, intake forms, anything else there that I missed? I think that covers it. Does anyone have questions about the intake form or contracts? The best thing I can say is get a scope of work. If your principal or your school site staff, your department head gives you an intake form with nothing attached, it's a bad sign. That means it's going to take longer. Have something attached, have that scope of work, so we know the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why in the front. So the question is there a listing of approved vendors? No, there's not, because it wasn't updated and I didn't want to post bad information. If you want to contract with a company, the best thing I can do is have you contact a contract specialist in our office, or if you're familiar with Board Docs and using the public-facing site, I think it's easy to use. My staff said you're crazy, but you could try it. Board Docs, for me, the search functions, it works. Sometimes if you put quotes around what you're looking for, it picks it up easier, so you don't get 25 different somethings with what you're looking for. So if you put quotes around your words, sometimes it helps. But also updated and available on our website is the point of contact list. And so that's all the employees in our department and the commodities and departments that they're responsible for, and their supervisors' information. So if our contract specialist is out of the office, they've possibly skipped over your email, feel free to email the supervisor. My email's on there. So open communication, whatever you need. So the instructions in Board Docs, I don't think so. I think that came with, when I was a new employee. Did I have my new employee orientation? Let me think. Probably not. No, I don't think it was there. But if you want, our contract specialist could walk through Board Docs with you. Najwa can help you. I can help you. Yeah. Any other questions about Coco?
I often, like the deadlines.
Yes, deadlines for. Mm-hmm.
For board things, I often get them from like Pascal and QE. Is there a way to ask you or on the website?
This distribution list for the for deadlines. If you're a Board Doc user and you have Board Doc access, Martha Corrales should be able to put you on a listserv. I think that's the way it works. Debbie's nodding her head yes. Yeah. And they're long. I know the timelines are so long. We'll do our best. I know it's so long.
So what if I'm not a Board Doc user, but I still need to know what the dates are?
Call us. We'll send you one. Yeah. Or I think there's a link from our website to Board Docs to the board office for their due dates. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, so what's next? ICA. So now we're going to address the difference between independent contractor agreements and having to use an intake form. And I wish I could say that the ICA is faster. In some cases it is, but it just depends on how many we're getting and the information that's provided on the ICA. So Najwa is going to come up and talk about independent contractor agreements. She oversees that section of our department.
Hello again. Okay, so our senior buyer, Cheryl Hauser, who's not able to attend today, she is the recipient of the wonderful completed ICAs that school sites and departments send to her, or that are completed. And the main identifier for an ICA is it's to be completed when the vendor does not need a signed contract. It's automatically eliminated if your vendor says, here are my terms and conditions and you must sign it. That will come on an intake form. So that's when you use an ICA, main identifier. Also, it can be used when you're trying to do professional service, professional development, a small event, or it's funded by ASB, and it's less than $10,000. And again, no one needs a signed contract. But our ICAs do need to go to the board. So Cheryl reserves typically actually, that's wrong. Cheryl takes ICAs to the board every month. That's our goal. And it would be wonderful if the event or the professional development didn't occur. We still need to follow the timelines to get the actions board approved. So if they can be submitted in a timely manner, meaning 8 to 12 weeks prior to the scheduled event or the purpose of the ICA, that is ideal. It's critical that certain sections of the ICA are completed properly. One would be ensure that the vendor completes their signature on the form. It's submitted with their signature, with their federal ID number or their social security number if they're not a registered business filed a W-9. It's important that the who, what, when, and where is clearly identified in the statement of this one-page document. That's the statement that we use to form our sentence on the board agenda item so we can get that agenda item approved, that request approved. It's important to identify if it's a unit price or an hourly rate and how many sessions are being performed. That falls under the who, what, when, and why. So it's a one-page form. It does have a lot of little lines. Please read it thoroughly and complete the requested sections of that. If you are paying for it, and if it's a cost request, your budget resource needs to be identified along with the description requirements. Andrew already talked about the intake forms a lot. Let's see. One thing I'd like to state is how to deliver the intake forms once it's signed, as well as the ICAs. And it's really preferred that it's sent to the contract specialist, the supervisor, or the buyer via email, not via email and school mail. It gets really confusing. We end up finding duplicate assigned contract numbers, or two people are tracking it differently. So one form, email preferred, and that would be in the PDF form, and your Word version of the intake form is also requested so that we can summarize and easily collect what you guys have put down as your background to help us draft the agenda items. So, if you have any questions, feel free to email me about ICAs and Cheryl, but I'll have some questions now. Yes?
I have a question. If we're going to use a vendor, but he also feeds for several other schools, and it's a free.
Just because an ICA went to the board and was approved doesn't make him an approved vendor. So it's event by event. So he's going to now this school site and another new school site. So each time you need an ICA.
So he's potentially completing this
multiple times. But for murals, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I just want to speak to that because if you look at a board item, it'll say usually it's around, what letter are we on now? I think superintendent's consent agendas fall under I. ICAs are typically I2, and it's the board is approving that specific event for that specific amount. So every time that vendor is doing work somewhere else, he needs to fill out the ICA form. Now, if it's a muralist, there's some additional additional forms that need to be filled out, like the artist waiver and self-help projects. I think John had information up there. Andrea Eaton is the person to contact in PPO. Is it on there? Self-help form. Yep. And so there's a section on the PPO website about self-help for artist murals. Any other questions? Run back here.
So if your intention is to have a ICA run July 1 through July 1, and your intention is to pay for it when the budgets are refreshed, is it okay to submit it to the board prior to, you were 8 weeks ahead of time?
Absolutely, because if you look at the agenda item, we're specifying the terms. So it'll say like ABC Company from July 1 through June 30th will provide this service. Yeah. There was a question up here.
Thanks. This is a question about the 10,000 amount. So is there a way to find out how much a vendor has been used across the district? Because that amount is for all schools using the vendor, right?
Cheryl's tracking. Yeah, Cheryl's tracking and on an Excel document all of the ICAs so she can see which, how much she's at. But we've tried over the years to streamline who's touching ICAs. In years past, we had like every contract specialist assigned to different areas or clusters of schools. So it was really confusing to even see aggregately what the contractors were spending. So now that we've got more people, I think it's easier for us to just get a hold of which contractors are doing what type of work. I think it's a good idea. Yes, her question was, is it a good idea to contact Cheryl Hauser prior to submitting an ICA? Yeah, because if you submit the ICA, she'll kick it back to you, and that'll probably take 4 to 5 days. So it could be 4 to 5 days that you're not wasting your time getting paperwork and things like that filled out. Do you have anything you want to add about the tracking?
Not so much tracking, but I didn't touch on a very important part, and is that if there's a budget associated to your ICA, you need to pay for something. Get that requisition in, create it, and let's move it along so that it's not going to sit there. And Cheryl will execute and source those, dispatch them actually as POs within 2 days after the board approval, assuming there's no issues with it. So that's really, really important, create the requisition.
That's a really good point, because then that pre-encumbers your funds too. So if you're processing your ICA form and doing all the paperwork, and then something happens where somebody else spent your money, but you've gone through all this work to get the ICA approved, and you haven't pre-encumbered those funds through the requisition, that's a huge bummer.
So which is the best practice? When you've filled out a contract intake form, should you, the requester, send it to the SOUP for signature and then they forward it to Cheryl, or should we send it to Cheryl and does she send it to the SOUP?
I can't speak to ICAs. I know for contract intake forms, they are really good about coming right to us from the area SOUP's office. What about the ICAs?
I think ICAs, usually it's the principal who's signing it and then passing it on, or the ASB advisor, right? It goes to Sophia Frere mostly for the high schools. I think it might be 60-40 for Cheryl, that she gets them from the superintendent, and sometimes the school site requester is the one just following up and also resending it. So maybe that's a question I can return to Cheryl with and get a definite answer and provide that.
What I did this year, I sent it to the soup, or the admin for the soup, and CC'd Cheryl, so she would know. Yeah.
That gives the buyer the heads up that this is coming.
Right, but it would, it would be nice to know what's the right way to do it, because you rethink it every year and it drives you nuts.
Well, we'll rethink it too, so it's clear. Yeah, because it's just like it took us a while to figure out why are we doing duplicate contracts. Oh, it's because school sites are mailing them and they're emailing them just to make sure that we've got both, and then it started creating duplicate contracts for us. But unless we tell you what works, you're going to keep doing both, and that's more work for you and it's more work for us. So let us figure it out, and then we'll let you know what seems to be the best practice.
I'm still unsure about the difference between the intake form and the ICA. Can you give me like simple terms on the difference between those two?
Sure. Do I need a mic? Oh, I can use this one. Go for it.
You want me to do it? Okay. If you're if your school, you're at a school site, okay, I'll give you a school site example. If your principal wants to hire Dr. So-and-so to come and do a professional development at your school site, and it's $5,000, and he has no terms and conditions, but he's licensed and he's going to give a professional development about something, I would suggest an intake form. And I'll tell you, because he's licensed, he's a professional in his field, he's a professional service provider, and if his information is wrong and your staff start to do something wrong, then through a contract we have the ways and means to, through errors and omissions insurance, things like that, to go back to him and say, you gave us wrong information, you taught our staff the wrong thing, and now it's affecting our operations. If you do an ICA, there's no ways and means to go back and, I'm not going to say sue, but something, to hold him accountable for the bad information that he provided your staff. Now, there's a difference between you're having a professional come on, or they're considered a professional, and do a bowling assembly, where they're typically not licensed in the field that they're training on. So that's sometimes we get questions about that type of circumstance for that type of service. Is that clear for that? Yes, that probably would work better. YMCA Playground Partners.
Correct. And that comes on. Now, do I need to do an intake?
Yeah, YMCA Playground Partners not only exceeds the $10,000 threshold district-wide, but that's a recurring service, or they have multiple people coming onto our campus. It's a high risk. It's a high. It's
full insurance.
Yeah, full insurance, and they typically have an agreement that they want us to sign, and so that right there is your kicker. You need to do an intake form.
But what if like a event like I have?
There's a rapper coming in for the kids, and they're gonna rap. Okay.
It is a really cool thing.
Yeah.
It's true, they do it for assemblies.
ASB funds probably, or foundation or something maybe. Yeah, so ASB would be an ICA, unless he's like, I'm going to rap and you're going to sign these 25-page terms and conditions. Then we do an intake form and he's going to sign our terms and conditions. Okay. The two quotes. The two quotes. Oh, so that was what we were talking about earlier about purchasing, right? That's the ICA threshold. And I'll tell you, I don't know where that $10,000 ICA threshold came from, and I don't even know that legal knows that either, because that's been like the threshold for years and years. And I don't know where they pulled the 10,000, because it's not in public contract code and it's not in ed code. So right now it's 10,000, but that might change because it's so odd. Does it have anything to do with independent contractors? Nothing. That's $500 or $800. They need a W. Yeah, $600 for the tax. Yeah, that's so odd. To answer that question, yeah, it adds up very quickly, very quickly. Okay, so we're running out of time, but our boxes are still empty, so you can add your questions there. Anything else before we wrap up?
Don't forget to get received.
Yes, thank you, Robin. Even you're doing a contract, they still need to be received. You still need to follow that purchasing requirement of distribution services, making sure that your service provider is billing you and sending you invoices. You went through all that work and filled out that 3-page intake form. It went to the board. It got approved. You put your requisition in. And make sure an invoice comes in, too, and that it's posted against that that PO. That's it?
ICA questions?
Okay. So I think that's it. You're welcome to stick around for a couple of minutes and ask us questions or drop them in the box. Thank you very much for attending the first annual. We really appreciate it.
Oh, wait. Oh,
wait. But wait, there's more. I think there's prizes. There is. If you're still here and you had dropped your name in
Nancy Graham.
Nancy Graham. Is Nancy Graham here from Boone Elementary? No. Okay.
Foster Elementary, I need a Tina.
Oh, look at Tina. Yay. How exciting.
How cute. How fun. You There's a smiley face right there. Distribution services.